happened less than 24 hours ago, which is that we had our first AGM. For those new to co-op parlance, that's the annual general meeting. It was our first one, our first public meeting as a co-op, and it was profound that after years of talking about being a co-op and that we're going to make a democratically governed music service that's designed to protect artists and listeners too. So from data mining or whatever, that we had our first public meeting last night was really exciting. It became real. It became tangible in a way that I wasn't anticipating. There were a few moments when I very, very literally teared up, just in quite humble astonishment of that. I know there's a few people here on the community call today that were there last night for the AGM.
Was it physical or online?
It was both. We met up at the Supermarket location. Supermarket is where is basically the office and event space out of which the Archain Europe co-op was founded, because that's where Ella Kegel works. And so she rented us the space last night. So we had people attending there and also online. And so I know Alex Crane, I think you were on the call. Was anybody else on dialing in remotely last night to the AGM?
Me, I was. I dialed in.
Nacho?
Yeah.
Nacho and Alex, I'd love to hear what you have to say about how that felt to be part of the first ever Resonate AGM experience.
I think, the word is profound. It was really nice to see how, what you said. I actually met Resonate 2 years ago by reading some of Peter's blog posts about Resonate, the stream-to-own model, being a co-op, and all of that, all those blog posts actually translated into reality, or were real last night. It was really nice to see all the work that was done to actually go into the AGM with a lot of information for co-op members to hear about, actually having the chance to vote in multiple issues and topics, and also have Peter just going through some some of the things that have been decided, and some of the things that we've done throughout last year. So it was amazing. It's great to be part of it.
Rich has a question. He was just wondering whether it was recorded or not. Yeah,
it was recorded, and I'm sure it will go up into archives. In a lot of ways, it was incredibly boring because it was a co-op meeting. I mean, you have to go through these procedures like approve the minutes.
I love boring things.
We now approve the minutes. Okay, the minutes have been approved. We now must review the budget. The budget was audited by the. There's something.
You want to have your car be boring. You don't want to have your car be real surprising. Like, oh, look, it's going backwards now. Oh, wait, what? No. Thanks, Rich. That's so true.
Yeah. So there's certain aspects like that, but I mean, I think the stuff that was really exciting was the participation when especially when questions were coming in online for all the folks that weren't obviously couldn't attend in Berlin. And to be able to really directly answer the concerns and questions from those community members was fantastic. And there were some really, really great questions. Alex, do you have any thoughts that you'd love to share about how the experience of the AGM was last night?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. It was I'm new, aside from my REI membership. Co-ops are a totally new thing for me, so it was really cool. Especially coming from years of working in corporate environments, here, just the democracy aspect of it is something I like a lot. So it definitely seemed like the beginning of more things to come. So yeah, very exciting.
Peter, can you share some of the questions that came up that were meaningful and that had answers that you could share with this group? Because it seems like that would be good to know for our greater community.
Yeah. So somebody asked an interesting question, which was, why do I have to pay a fan membership in fiat? Why, shouldn't it be in crypto? Blockchain. Why aren't the payments all in crypto? And I said, well, we believe that, we want to get as many people into the service as possible, and the majority of people are using normal currencies. But the thing I got to point out, which he wasn't anticipating, was that under co-op rules in Ireland, you have to know who your members are. You have to have a name and address, and usually you get that when you do a bank transaction or a credit card transaction, because we have to have a registry of who our members are. And I talked a bit about maybe the idea that eventually over time, as self-sovereign ID systems and blockchain evolve, maybe there could be some new kind of international cooperative where you could, have a different format. But for now, we are based on, real law. We're based, Resonate itself is based on Irish law, Irish cooperative law. And so we're required to know who our membership is. And so that was an interesting one. Another one was when we were passing the resolution to define how an artist earns a member share. The motion was that you upload one song, and that's what earns you an artist member share. And we're a multi-stakeholder cooperative, so you have contributors, you have listeners, and you have artists and labels. And so somebody raised a question, and the answer to that was about we have to be forward thinking in terms of how the system might get gamified. Somebody might try and take advantage of it. We've read so many stories about fraud and streaming of people, using, third-party services like CD Baby or TuneCore or whatever to access Spotify, and then, basically running, tracks and doing streaming just 24/7 on stuff that nobody's actually listening to other than bots for the purpose of siphoning money out of the system. And so, one point of, caution in terms of like long-term is we may have to figure out a way for the community to actually verify that that's a song, that's an artist, that's actually music. Of course, you get into a lot of gray areas around that. One man's Zeppelin is another man's Conway Twitty.
Unless it's actually Zeppelin.
Unless it is actually Zeppelin.
Have another issue going.
Yeah.
And that's where the social graph verified aspect and the validators for songs, so that other people that are already validated can potentially stamp. It's just like the creative passport. You have to be known, and this is what the passport means, just like having a passport. A creative passport is no less secure. So when you're in the studio and you lay down a track, your passport connects with your thing, and that is validated by others. And so that's one of the things that the future studio is going to look like. And I'm excited to see it because it leads to the immediate transaction reimbursement to the artist that made it on transaction. So
yeah,
we'll get on you.
Absolutely. So unless there are other questions about our AGM, which happened, as I said, last night, I would love to just welcome a few new members. I'd love to hear some more from Rich Jensen. We talked a bit last week. He used to work at Sub Pop, which I think is absolutely mind-blowingly amazing. And then I can also see, just kind of scrolling through the list, we've got members of a ticketing team. You guys did a reconfiguration of your name, but I can't remember what it was. It's Fabian and Derek. I want to welcome you guys. And Derek's, I think, new to the call. And then somebody, who I believe I met in London, is that Dror Dion? I don't know if you want to say hi to the community. I think we met in London at the Platform Co-op conference there. You don't have to, speak up if you don't feel like it, but if you want to say hi to everybody, that'd be cool.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think it's my second time listening to this, and sometimes I listen through on the YouTube one. Yeah, I mean, I just like kind of as an Archain Co-op member, like to know what the dApps are doing. So I mostly listen.
Cool. No, well, thank you for being there. That platform co-op conference was quite exciting. Ned Robinson, there's a new name. Ned, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I just joined Archain this week. I'm going to be heading up the solutions group. So our mission is going to be to help onboard third-party portfolio companies and help as much as we can to get people up on the blockchain, on the Archain blockchain.
Excellent.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's exciting.
Yeah, happy that you joined. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to be in touch soon.
Absolutely.
And I think Claire, our lead developer, is here. Maybe she's not here, but you'll be hearing from her.
Hey, Ned, great to see you, and looking forward to working together. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. I am too. I'm going to be in Berlin. I'm really excited about Berlin. I am an erstwhile musician myself. Trained the classical pianist, trained, and had a software company for a bunch of years back in I won't say when, but back in the early 90s. I actually wrote the first digital software compression, time compression software. So our software slowed music down without changing the pitch. So great for transcribing and practicing those really fast Jimmy Page guitar solos.
What was the name of that?
Nice. That's cool.
The software was called CD Looper, and the company was Replay Technologies.
Ah, cool. Excellent. Do you think there's any transferable skills of onboarding companies and onboarding artists that we could learn in Resonate? Are there any similarities to that, as far as ingestion into the catalog?
If that's for me, I'm sure there is, but I don't know enough yet to really answer that.
It sparked a thought. That's all.
Yeah. No, it's a good one.
I wanted to say that my relation to Sub Pop is sort of emeritus. I contributed. I met Bruce, that's founded Sub Pop, when Sub Pop was cassette fanzine in 1981, based on I think it was called Fast Zine out of Australia at the time. The idea of a fanzine on cassette. I was a contributor as an artist in '83. I knew a lot of the artists in the circle, and then when they had some business issues in 1991, I came on board because I knew how to run an Excel spreadsheet, and that's what they needed. And I ended up kind of running the company for about 9 years. I started my own company called Up Records with my roommate Chris, and we built the Spill and Modest Mouse. So one perspective that I bring, and my association, I'm a community member here and essentially a community member there. But if I bring any insight, it's in seeing things go from the intuitive, linguistic, sort of social level into networks that end up having global significance and consequence. And it's that there's kind of a direct line to what motivated me 35 years ago and to what I'm observing in this community. So
wow,
I'm hanging out.
I think it would be great for you and Daryl to meet up, because one of the things that came up in a chat with Daryl today was looking forward. I know past, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, our AGM, which happened last night, is how that's going to evolve over time. One of the fundamental things that we've been working on that's like the basic building blocks of everything is that we, since receiving the investment from Reflective earlier this year and starting to really build up the team, it was clear right away that we had to really fully rebuild our entire membership system. And because we've been dealing with this real hodgepodge sort of code base from the volunteer stage when we were just fledgling as a co-op, and so that connects back to this thing about community, because what we're looking at is how does this co-op evolve over time, And it's been very difficult to operate as a global co-op because of just that basic fundamental thing of not having our own custom membership system of, sign up, username, password, this is your account type, you're enabled because you uploaded that song. And, we've had a hodgepodge of WordPress and other things for a while. And as that gets, we transition out of this, which is happening very soon, one of the tools that we're implementing with is Lumio, which is a great service that's designed for running either co-ops or other types of decentralized organizations. And we're super close to being able to put that integration into place. And so that's going to be the time where we are going to really start to open that up and having more community discussions and really engaging with people around the collective intelligence that exists in the wider community of, we think we've got a pretty good, a good set of ideas figured out about how we're going forward, but there's always going to be certain, inflection points around should we go left or right on a particular topic. And so it might be really interesting for you and Daryl to get together offline or asynchronously to have those chats.
I would love to talk more with you, Rich. I remember those mixtapes, I guess you could call them, back in the day. I was about like 18 or 19 playing with this band called 5440. We were from Vancouver. And I remember traveling down the West Coast, blasting those tapes and getting inspired. And the scene in Seattle and Olympia in particular was so cool back then.
Oh, we've got a lot to talk about, Daryl. In response to some of Peter's comments there, obviously, the trick is figuring out, translating values into systems. And so this is an area where I'm particularly interested to continue the conversation with the community is, how, as you bring established artists into the system, how do you best do that so that whatever they're bringing, because basically we're in a situation in the world now where cultural value, many different things are not appropriately valued. And this is why, like in Seattle right now, we have the forests of British Columbia are actually in our atmosphere. We can hardly breathe. In the last week, we've had the worst air on the planet for any urban center because the forests are literally burning. And really, this is a direct consequence of a poor assignment of value throughout society at a global scale. So as the co-op goes forward and as you try to implement what you're describing as membership, you don't want to, I'm wary of a class system, but there has to be a way that sort of intelligent cultural auditors can assign preliminary experimental value or something to established artists that are bringing their reputation and, if not their work, to the space. So I'm curious. I'm sure you guys have all thought about this, and it'll be interesting to see how you've thought about it, and both how that conversation goes and how it translates into your programmatic systems, both at an administrative level and as code.
That will be Daryl's task. You got to figure that out, Daryl. It's your responsibility. I'm putting that on your shoulders. I think Rich has got it figured out.
I just can't wait to talk, Rich.
Rich, could you restate that? I hate to ask you to do that because it was a lot, but the core of it, what are you saying?
Basically, I'm curious about your established artist strategy and policy and how that's going to be coded into the governance of the co-op and community as a whole going forward. If Erykah Badu wants to come and play, that's great, and you should set her. And also, as she joins the cluster will have a kind of it's like a stew. The different flavors that you bring in actually make an excellent stew. That's what you want to have. So you need to know, like we need more salt, we need more cardamom, we need whatever in the stew. Now that unfortunately creates a governance problem, because who gets to decide who's the chef? And we know what happens when there's too many cooks. So I'm just curious how the community's resolving some of these problems. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And actually, that's something I've been wondering about, is how do you bring established players into the scene and make it somewhat smoother, or even get them there in the first place. So,
I think also it would allow for the ecosystem and the financial platform for the company to be able to get stronger. Because if we're looking at bands like Chance the Rapper, or be it Radiohead, or I mean, so many of these artists or Frank Ocean. There's a lot of bands that are no longer signed to major labels. And how do we create that opportunity to be able to onboard them? That way, it strengthens the entire ecosystem.
And
Yeah, I'd love to jump. Oh, sorry, Rich, go ahead.
well, I'll mute here in a sec, but just that, as someone who, got into music and operated for 10 years in the hardcore punk environment, essentially, which in its time, of course, was closely related to dub, and essentially anti-racist in its time, and essentially multicultural in its ambitions. But for operating 10 years without any regard for legacy authority, and no recognition from media, we established our own social network. So what I'm saying is, it's got to be a blend. That genius kid that's 12 years old right now needs to feel as likely to be able to be fluent in the space as these other names. And so again, it's a governance kind of problem that I'm really curious how the co-ops.
Yeah, I really look forward to responding to this, because it's something I've thought about a great deal. There's a couple of things that have been stated over and over and over again in the last 3.5 years, since I first started talking about the project. One is, thank you. We need a better way to pay artists. We need something that's more fair to pay artists. The second one was, you're going to need to have people I know. You're not going to be able to operate as a service if you don't have recognizable content. You're not going to be able to build a service off of the long tail and provide something that's meaningful to the market, because people need to go on and be able to find things that they've heard of. So while our strategy has always been targeted around artists that own their catalogs or the independent sector, for a wide variety of reasons, it's clear that there's a point at which that can create a possible tension, as you've kind of outlined. We've already tossed out some names recently from folks that are 1 degree of separation away. And it was interesting, as just, conversations around the water cooler, so to speak, how that triggered some interesting responses of, that we could suddenly be perceived as giving preference to somebody who's already famous, somebody who's already established, and all that. So we do need to be careful to craft a good balance between, you can come to the service and find something that you're familiar with, so you feel that you're going to have stuff to listen to, that you're not going to be totally lost in exploring something, like absolutely everything is completely unknown to you. But then you want it to be able to have some freedom with that. And I think what this issue kind of brushes up against is something that's really quite disturbing. And that's the algorithmic process of the self-reinforcing feedback loops that have occurred on the other platforms. And I would very much recommend people check out an article by Liz Pelly when she did an expose around gender on Spotify. And what she did was create a whole bunch of different distinct accounts that had no data history. There was nothing tied. They were brand new accounts. And she started methodically going through the service and, constantly doing gender analysis on what was being offered. And the overwhelming conclusion was that it kept reinforcing into to a predominantly male demographic. And some of the theories about why that occurs is that, algorithmic based systems can create these self-reinforcing feedback loops that that lead you down this funnel of that's really super undesired. So I've said kind of flippantly on a number of occasions, I hope that Resonate can build a completely algorithm-free streaming service. Practically speaking, that may not be possible in some ways, but what I'm hoping will occur, and there's somebody on this call by the name of John Beezer. I have to call you out. Maybe John, or maybe others that will hopefully be able to figure out a way in which the community can be the algorithm, that we can create that balance through engagement with the community, but always remembering that there's going to have to be some mechanisms where, we want to make sure that women get a fair chance. When so much of the systems that are surround the music business have been shown over and over again to favor men, unconsciously, unintentionally, they just do. And so I think that this is going to be a great example of something that's going to require a lot of introspection and a lot of feedback and iteration with the community over time, and that's the great thing about having a co-op model. And I will stop talking now.
I just have a question about the actual feature set of Resonate. Are you able to upload your own music to Resonate?
Yes, artists are doing that every day.
I don't really foresee a problem. The only problem is your own ambition. If you want to be a global service that has billions of plays a day, then yeah, you're going to have to play really dirty and get the biggest artist in the world, staked behind you, right? But if it just grows organically, I don't see this schizophrenic need to be the biggest thing on the planet, just like EOS did, right? And now, oh wait, they can't get their mainnet launched. Oh wait, okay, they launched it. Oh, it's not hitting the transaction speeds, this and that, right? It's not really concurrent, right? This is what happens when you try to be the best thing, biggest thing on the planet. So why can't it just be like a small thing that rolls out? Is like the investment and investors and gonna come knocking on your door? Like, what's sort of?
It's just.
What's the sweet spot, I think, is what Christian is asking. What is the sweet spot? Because are we going after Spotify and having 83 million people subscribing to the service every month and going in that direction, which I don't believe that's the direction we're going after? Are we going after putting up 40 to 50 million songs up on the service to be able to connect it to the larger music ecosystem? So what's the sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it, and I think the S word, the other S word other than sweet spot, is sustainable.
Absolutely,
it's not about being famous and number one and all that, because I mean Spotify's number one and hasn't made money. So
with a loss of $461 million in the last year and currently valued at, what is it, like $34 billion on Wall Street. I mean, they're doing something right, but on paper, they're certainly able to doctor up some numbers to be able to project that they're losing money.
Well, go for it, Lee.
I was going to say, because I believe that was Christian's voice that mentioned something about EOS, and then you look at Spotify and you look at all of these companies that are going out and doing big. It's all marketing, so they spend endless amounts of hundreds, like millions of dollars on marketing. So, and I don't think that's the strategy here. So, when you mention, when I hear EOS and, just like that Spotify numbers and what they're doing, I mean, you can look at their model, and you can also look at SoundCloud, and just go look at their financial budgets, and you can just see how much money is spent on marketing. So I think here, just like what I witnessed within our chain, we'll prove something first, do the little marketing that you need to do, and then go out to the world when you're ready.
So Peter, what do you think is the sweet spot for in terms of when Resonate is flush with content? You know, I mean, is there an idea in terms of what would be a sustainable model for the company? Number of users plus amount of content?
Yeah, well, the target market has always been based around some very critical and key information research that came from Nielsen. They did a study that identified where money was being spent in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was, and sometimes I fudge the numbers by like 1% or whatever. It was like the top segment of music fans by number of fans is 13 or 14%, but they spend about 27% of the money. So you've got this top tier of music fans that's spending almost a third of the total money in the market. Much, you know, 3 times bigger than by just total volume. And one of the interesting things about that study was they said that there was another $500 million to $2 billion on the table if those fans had something that connected, like a bundle of services. You know, so if you were able to get, you know, you buy an album, you buy a CD or something, and then you get a discount on a T-shirt or a ticket, or you get some kind of exclusive content when you become a real fan. And if those kinds of integrated offerings were on the table, there's an extra $500 million to $2 billion that those fans are willing to spend, but they can't get because they're not getting these offers. They have, you know, everything's fractured across multiple platforms and things. So that's always been the vision of, you know, the streaming service is that core hub.
Yep.
It's the thing that feeds everything, and all the ancillary stuff that comes around it is where that sustainable income is going to come from.
That's the glue. It's all the extra stuff that's attached to it around the ecosystem. That's the glue that allows for this first to be built massive ecosystem can actually work. I totally know what you're saying.
Exactly. And I wrote blog posts about this years ago, kind of outlining that vision and saying that that's where we want to go with this, always with the thinking in mind of what does an artist need, you know, because if we're not building something that's actually truly meaningful to them, then it's irrelevant in a cultural perspective, and it's also kind of violation of the cooperative principles of taking care of your stakeholder classes. And so one of those ideas that kind of became really immediately relevant was exclusivity, because this is something you tend to see with corporations, you know. Spotify or Apple or Pandora or whoever, they do a deal and they do it with Ticketmaster or, you know, what is it, StubHub or whatever. And that's the one deal. And so if you want to find out about something else outside of, you know, clicking play and listen to some music, you're going to them because that's who they've decided to work with, you know, and that's a corporate decision-making process. So a cooperative decision-making process is, how do I benefit the shareholder class? How do I benefit the different stakeholder classes? And so you can immediately go, oh, if I'm an artist and one artist says, I want to use brown paper tickets, and another one says, I want to use Eventbrite, and another one says, I want to use this new blockchain ticket thing that I've just heard about, then shouldn't they be able to choose? And shouldn't the listeners be able to choose? And so you create a whole new paradigm around that. And so the sustainable vision for us is maybe that we won't necessarily, like streaming could be a loss leader just as it is a loss leader for Apple and Amazon, and to a lesser extent Google Tube, that it could be a gateway into all that other stuff. And if it's designed to meet the needs of the artists and fans first in a cooperative economics kind of model, then that's the sweet spot for me. That said, maybe more directly answering your question, because I've been rambling quite a bit, is to hit that target market, they want independent music. And so we need to have a lot of really good independent music. And that's going to be the long tail stuff that nobody's ever heard of, that somebody's making in their bedroom. And that's going to be something that's on Ninja Tune or K7 or 6 Degrees or some of these really tastemaker labels that have been around for tastemaker independent labels that have been around for a while. And I think that's the balance. Plus, famous artists that own their catalog because they've bought their catalog back and have control over it again. And we're going to have a sprinkling of them too.
There's a whole lot of them. There are a whole lot.
Yeah, there's tides shifting on that front for sure.
Yeah. And one could also mention the situation when Taylor Swift went rogue. And the reason why Taylor Swift could go rogue is because, yes, she was attached to lots of major labels for her distribution, but she owned her own catalog through her indie label called Big Machine. A lot of people don't know this. Taylor Swift is an indie artist. And so even the biggest indie artists that are connected to the majors, like the Adeles and the Taylor Swifts of the world, can go rogue with a different streaming service. We've seen her do it. So I could envision a potential scenario where, because what happens is music happens and then the world follows. We've seen this many, many times. We saw it with punk rock. We saw it in Seattle with Nirvana. When Nirvana ignited into the world, all the major labels, it was around Christmas time, and all the major labels were doing all the safe bets, and they were holding back the pressing plant so they could print Garth Brooks' greatest hits and Michael Jackson's greatest hits. And they're about to release, their surefire bets during the Christmas season. And that's when Nirvana came along. The major labels had no clue. The industry had no clue. There wasn't even a radio format for them yet.
Maybe Rich can actually, being there, tell us what it was like being there.
Actually, I was just going to say the same thing had happened in the 80s in the Bronx with hip hop. I mean, it's kind of a tedious story at this point. We should wake up and just recognize that music is the channel through which the subjectivity of the future arrives. And
can somebody write that down? Say that again.
Music is the channel, I think I said, through which the subjectivity of the future arrives.
That's some Noam Chomsky kind of shit right there.
Wow.
Bro, that's what you got to work with, bro.
Well, and it's very true.
Because it's the most immaterial architecture. It's strictly space. It's spatial. And it's about interior space and exterior space. And it's about the vibrations in the space. And the vibrations that are organized it's sublingual. It's where sublingual comes to lingual. So that's why it's important. That's why we're having this conversation. And just one of the things I want to say is that talking about bundles, talking about, Peter's somewhere now. He can watch this in recording or something. But we're talking about money, like the problem, again, if I want to talk about the smoke in the atmosphere in Seattle, it's about the wrong idea of money and value. And so you need to leverage the coin. The most brilliant artist, the most brilliant poet, I had the pleasure of working with this cat, but the most brilliant poet in Seattle, he's like any of the brilliant poets throughout history, is having a hard time holding down his place in the material world. And if you've got people that can join the co-op and they're sharing resources like a place to stay in different cities, and I know some other people are speaking to this and thinking about this, but if the co-op can be a place where music economy is materialized so that artists can be sustained in an intelligent way, all the way through one coherent gesture. I mean, this is why I'm into Rolang, because it's a fundamental, it's a fundamental decentralization of process at a very formal level. And if you scale up from decentralized and shared, it's a way to recompile value on a planetary scale. And you guys are ahead of the curve in music. So let's do it. That's where I'm at.
Wow.
Amen.
And I would love to connect some dots between what you just said and drop a little, an interesting little thing to Greg Meredith, because, you know, you talked about Rolang and you talked about local co-ops, I think, in a way. And Greg, I want to let you know, I've got invited somebody into Berlin that I want to hook you up with. She's one of the co-founders of an arts organization called Furtherfield. And she's been in pretty in-depth conversations with DAO Stack and what they're working on as they've been around for 15 years. They're taking things to the next level. And what they've been working on is a model of global to local cooperative arts organizations. So you have local cooperative hubs in cities that connects up to a global organizational level, so that you can send things up and send things down. And DAO Stack, who I think you've been collaborating with indirectly through Filipa Primavera, I think that's how you say your name. There's an interesting connection point there. Greg, do you want to say anything about the Plantoid project and to connect some of those dots? I think Greg's on mute. I don't know if I can take him off mute.
Hi there.
Greg.
Yeah, it's good to hear the discussion. I'm enjoying the discussion. The Plantoid project is a project that's a really fascinating idea from Primavera de Filippi. Primavera is quite well known in the blockchain space. And apart from being a sort of a brilliant legal mind, she's also a sculptor. And she has created an entity which it has sort of both a genome and a phenome. So the genome lives on the Ethereum blockchain currently as a smart contract, which is basically it collects votes for the next design of the Plantoid sculpture, which is the phenome part of this part of the entity that is Plantoid. And people are participating in Plantoid. They fund the next version of Plantoid by through the governance process, through voting on the next designs, and that gives the sculpture the funding to sort of become its next iteration. The sculpture itself is a plant-like entity, and it's continually changing in terms of its shape and its features. This most recent iteration has added what she calls photosynthesis. So she's added a bunch of sensors to the sculpture that collect light and heat information. And then that is translated in via algorithms into music. So there's a nighttime music, which is sort of very, very dance oriented, and there's a daytime music which comes from an algorithmic approach using transcendental numbers that I came up with some years ago, and that algorithm is written in Rolang, well, a combination of Rolang and Scala, and it's a really fun way to think about how to generate music algorithmically. But people can interact with the sculpture, casting shadow or exposing the sensors, which then changes the inputs to the algorithm, which then generates new music, both in the daytime version and in the nighttime version. and that sculpture is being deployed at Burning Man. So if you're headed off to Burning Man, you can go see the plantoid and engage with it. And Christian, who's doing this series here, along with another video crew, will be out there filming the plantoid project. And as well as Patrick McGuire, our communications director, will be at Burning Man. So we recommend anyone who's headed off to Burning Man, go check it out. And if you're not able to make it to Burning Man this year, then at least for the plantoid bit, we'll have video of the whole effort for people to take a look at. But we're very excited about it. I think it's a fantastic idea from start to finish. And it was also a demonstration of the reach of the technology. In particular, the plantoid music algorithms are running on a Raspberry Pi. And that means that the R-Chain node is running on a Raspberry Pi. So that pushes the limits of the node down to the very small. There's another demo that we'll be giving in Berlin, where we've been putting the node up on the Kubernetes architecture from Google, so you get some of the Kubernetes auto scaling. So we've gone from the very small to the very large, and we're quite excited about the node software in this regard. Yeah, it seems to work well across a lot of different scales, which is what we've been saying for some time now.
Nice. That's exciting stuff. I'm curious if there have been any conversations with Primavera about possibly bringing DAOstack, which I think she's a co-founder of, into the R-Chain family.
Yeah, that's something we definitely want to pursue.
Cool. So in Berlin, I'll introduce you to Ruth Catlow, one of the co-founders of the Further Field Network. They did an amazing book, Art on the Blockchain, which was a compilation of 15 to 20 different artists that looked at blockchain from the point of view of an artist. And they did there was some very radical approaches to envisioning this technology in radically different ways. So that's going to be nice to introduce you to in Berlin. For those of you who don't know, if you're new to the call, there is going to be the Berlin Developers R-Chain Conference. Archon 3 is happening the first week of September. 3rd and 4th are private days for developers, and the 5th and 6th are for the community. I do have a few passes, I think, still left. If you're planning to come and don't have your ticket, there might be a couple left. So you can always send me a DM, a message, an email, or whatever to request a ticket.
I have a question regarding Archon 3. Has the time and date been identified for the presentation of the killer app?
4 p.m. on the 5th.
Yeah. Okay, and is there a press release that's been completed on that?
It is a work in progress. It's been developed as a press briefing at the moment. The press releases, which are kind of different in nature, are also being crafted, and there's a team working on that right now.
And is there any one paragraph preliminary copy ready to be shared with some people? Not regarding the app, but particularly the presentation. I have some folks in Berlin that I'm going to bring out for it.
I would just say there's going to be an interesting demo of a new audio technology at the Berlin Developers Conference, and just ask them to come.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we're kind of coming up on like the last 10 minutes. If there's anything just throwing it open. It's been a very stimulating conversation today. And,
I've been listening. I'm in the airport right now in San Diego. I'm flying to Seattle right now. And I just wanted to drop this little thing in. Last night I was playing a concert for 2,000 people at the Embarcadero Marina Park, which is where the San Diego Symphony performs. And it was an all-female band, kind of an all-female jazz night. And I've never done a show that was just with all women before. But it was organized by my friend Gilbert Castellanos, who's an amazing trumpet player and somebody who's been around the world with everybody. And he was telling me about how to make this stuff happen, it really has to be kind of an intentional effort, And I was just really moved by his willingness to organize the whole thing and fly all of us in and to put on this really unique show. And I don't know, I was just listening a bit to your guys' conversation before, and I just want to add, usually it takes an intentional effort to really make these things happen. But then once the effort is put in, it can be totally amazing. So, yeah.
Very much agree.
I for the last 5 years, I've had a project, and my partner is Talela. He's a hip hop rapper, and he's a Native American member of the Talela Reservation. And I was in a meeting with him this week, and he said, "You guys," he's a couple of us there, and he's like, "You guys can have access. Just remember to send the elevator back down." I think that's how I want to reply to Nora's comment.
I don't know if I see women as downstairs from men, but I don't know if that's how you meant it either. But I completely agree with you, totally.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Just reinforcing the intentionality aspect. There was a comment earlier about Liz Pelly's article talking about the algorithm steering everything back toward the men.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece.
And I look forward to reading it, but it's steering it back toward power. And definitely we're in a patriarchy, so we recognize that, but there are many other kinds of legacy power. I'm not saying not doing an all lives matter here. I'm just saying let's use our intentionality to break legacy power and come up with something better. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I think Peter was saying about making the community the algorithm is going to be the thing. And if anybody wants that article, I linked it in the chat. Liz's article. It's really actually quite amazing. So.
Well, in my mind, it starts with having a service that everybody owns.
Something came to me this morning that has been, it's moving into the unfamiliar is required for growth. So that was in a dream. So.
Well said. Anybody have any?
I was gonna say maybe a good way to start working on that is to start inviting some women into this call. I see a lot of men.
Yeah.
So if you have other women that would be interested, that'll be a good first step.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of a lot of white men, a lot of white men too. So we need to get all genres.
Mixed race, second rep.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring a friend next time.
Last Friday, I was up in Seattle, and I got to go to the studio and see and hear with my own ears some of the audio technology that's going to be released at Archon 3, and I got to work on a mix of one of my songs for the demo for Archon 3, and I just want to say that it's truly amazing and a really important part of what's happening here, and very exciting stuff going on at the studio in Seattle. And Nora is going to be there later today.
Yep, it's going to be awesome.
Cool. Well, maybe we'll wrap up a few minutes early, unless anyone's got any last minute thoughts for this Friday afternoon. It's afternoon here in Berlin. We're all ready to go home. You're all getting started in Seattle and elsewhere.
Thanks for hosting, Peter.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a good week.
Love to
Bye,
you
everyone.
all.
Have a great weekend.